preparing. Because then what I'll do is once it goes live, we'll just link it all to the places.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay. It should be live now. Yes. Okay, we are live.
Sweet. What's up, everyone?
Yeah. What's up? What's up, everyone? It's weird because I have to like look at two separate screens.
Yeah, I'll try to make it as close as possible to the lens.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. Okay, then I'll put it to one more place.
Also, I'm gonna record this as a backup just in case I want to do like a short preview on the channel.
Yeah, yeah. Some like last minute things, everyone. If people are hopping in here, let me check. Ooh, how do I check that actually? Oh, there we go. Participants. Okay, so I guess yeah, it's a Friday night. We're gonna talk about some Cosmere stuff today. We're doing I think I couldn't say Cosmere conversation because I feel like I'd get sued for that. I think that's a different podcast, but we're doing a Cosmere discussion.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So today's topic is going to be regarding two of our favorite people in the whole Cosmere. It's going to be Kelsier and Moash, and are they fundamentally the exact same character, but in a different setting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so I suppose it's gonna be a light debate because Zach definitely believes that they are, and for me, I believe that they aren't. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of core differences that I feel make them very different.
I think for me
Um,
personally, there's a middle ground between both of them. I think fundamentally they check a lot of boxes of being the same character, but it's almost like if you flip their scenarios, they would have ended up basically doing the exact same thing. Given if Kelsier was on Roshar and Moash was on Scadrial, they would probably may have done the exact same thing. But it's one of those things where it's fun to talk about and discuss.
yeah. Just curious too, if there are any people watching, if they can make sure that the audio levels are good too,
Yeah,
just because that's something that I always ask for when I
yeah.
live stream. So,
I guess the also big thing is we're going to probably be throwing spoilers around. So if you haven't
oh
read,
yeah, big
um,
spoilers.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
some big spoilers for. See, this is kind of hard. Do you do rhythm up to Rhythm of War? Do we do Era One or Era Two of Mistborn?
I think we sort of have to mention. I mean, I don't think we have to mention. Ah, man, it's hard because I think mostly if we're talking about Calcier, it would be the first book, right?
So
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but of course, the secret history and whatnot. So there's still that.
So
So
just
I
be
suppose.
prepared for spoilers if you haven't read all of them. You know, you know, danger be upon here, all who enter here, in many ways. But
Yeah.
when it comes down to it, I think before we start the whole conversation, what are your initial impressions with both characters? What do you like about them, and what do you hate about them? If you hate them, I think there's a whole Reddit thing all about hating a particular character, mostly Moash.
I don't hate Moash. I really like
Mhm.
Calcier. Um, I don't like the fact that Moash did what he did in Rhythm of War, and yeah, that's. But I don't hate him. You know, like I can understand his motive and empathize with him. It's just, and arguably he's being manipulated when he did you know, kill a very important character. So I mean, we can just outright say it, right? It's
Yeah,
okay.
we've already done the spoiler stuff. If people don't know at this point, I mean, there's a couple people he's already killed at this point. So yeah,
Yeah, so him killing Teft was like a big thing for me. The fact that he did that almost makes him unredeemable, but at the same time, like he was being manipulated. So yeah,
yeah, no, there's a lot of those moments, especially when it comes personally for me, is that see, Moash is a character that a lot of stories you have to have a person that you absolutely hate, and Moash just checks all those boxes in many ways. Like if you if you went from the first book, it was Elakar because he checks all those boxes, but by the
Uh-huh.
story's end, it's a little different. But for
By
me,
book
what
3,
by book three, you're like, okay, I kind of like Elakar,
he's
but there's like,
redeeming himself, you know? Like little by
yeah,
little, he's making himself into a character we can root for.
yeah. I mean, there's that thing is
And then
also,
Moash goes boom, and then
yeah,
it's done.
yeah. See, I'm also used to this because of A Song of Ice and Fire, where characters just die left and right, and I'm just like, okay, I guess sometimes things aren't a good thing. Sometimes these people have self improvement arcs. Nope, they're dead before they even finish saying "I love you."
Yeah, but I mean that was definitely a big like what the heck moment for me for book 3. And I don't know if I disliked Moash at that point. Um I kn- he obviously somewhat betrayed Kaladin, but at the same time Kaladin somewhat betrayed him in the fact that, he said he would go through with his plan to murder.
Do it the first time.
Yeah, yeah, the first time to murder
Yeah,
Alucard the first time, but they didn't, and he didn't. He backed out.
yeah,
So, but at the same time, it's not really a betrayal. It's more like I changed my mind, Um,
yeah.
and
Same
then
as
Moash
a
went behind his back.
yeah, especially same as if we switch over to Kelsier in many ways. If I start to do like the compare and contrast, is like when it comes to Kelsier, everyone likes him because the first paragraph or the first chapter of Mistborn, you're from his perspective almost. Just like,
Hmm.
yeah, he's like helping all these people, but by the end of the story, you're just wait a second, something's off about this guy, and obviously as the story progresses, you realize that he's more may not be the Kelsier that you wanted, more of the ruination that he ends up being with everything. But even so, like even in Mistborn, if we're looking for the foil that you're supposed to hate, it's supposed to be Marsh, really, throughout that story, rather than anything, or even Vin to an extent.
Sorry, what was that about Martian Vin? You're
Well, I'm
supposed to
saying
what?
like it kind of like if we look at the opposite side, like how you look at the first book, the real villain or someone that kind of is like that as Marsh is almost the foil in many ways. Like, ah, man, I hate this guy, and you kind of
Hmm,
he gets his
interesting.
redemption a little bit.
I mean, when he was being controlled, yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't like that, but when Marsh was just Marsh, he was fine to me. I didn't dislike him or
I
anything.
don't
Yeah.
see. I don't have any problem when it comes to everyone on Scatro. They all have their own problems, but that's what makes them fun. But when you get to like Rosha, that's when people have like super duper problems, and
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
don't know what to do. Like, wow, someone's so paranoid of assassination that he'll fake his entire assassination attempt. Yeah.
Yeah, but getting to the topic at hand, I think one core difference between Kelsier and Moash is they're sort of like, how do I say this, role in a team, right? Kelsier is the leader, and he his motive is very clear, and he's the one who's that sort of, I mean, with the help of Ruin, obviously, in the background, he's able to actually accomplish his goal of taking out the Lord Ruler. For Moash, he's sort of being manipulated, or at least he's sort of being used by other people who also want to take out Alucard. So Moash's role in that is sort of just like a pawn to be used versus
Mm,
like his actual motive being the thing that's driving him to create the plans and um
yeah.
stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, see, like for me, when it comes to both of them, like I try to like break it down to like I made like a whole box of like things that are similar about them. I think the biggest thing is that they're screwed over by the whole system of the whole world in many ways. Like when it comes to Moash, his grandparents were screwed over, and thus he's sent to Sadius's bridge crew. Whereas when it comes to um wow. Kelsier. I had a brain fart for a second there. I think there's some ruination in my brain right now. When it comes to Kelsier, he's like this gentleman thief who had one bad score because he didn't know this one thing about, one particular power thing. He ends up going to the pits of half sin with his wife. And due to the whole situation of how things are, she dies and he's able to survive. But there's that bitterness and regret because they both go through hell and back, and yes, by the end of those books, they are like I guess not for Kelsier's a better person, but at least you have like those moments where they look out and kind of like, at least smile in the end a little bit. But things do get worse for both of them.
Yeah, yeah. There are definitely similarities, and those events have make them like go through similar things, but I do think they came out of it very differently, because obviously they both want revenge, but Moash actually gave up on his plans for revenge. He became like a nobody basically. He was just gonna straight up die if Kaladin wasn't there. But the thing about Kelsier, he had the will to survive and actually form a plan to succeed with his revenge. So I feel like that's a very core difference between the two that makes them different characters, overall.
Yeah.
Even though the same thing sort of happened to them. Um,
Yeah, see, there's like a lot of similar light, especially when it comes to them. I think one of the biggest things that I've always noticed about them is that when it comes to Kelsier, he's more chummy with everyone. Like he's the person that everyone wants to be around, whereas Moash is kind of
yeah, he
has
he
always
has
been.
high charisma.
Yeah, compared to like I think Moash might have zero charisma a little bit. Because even in the first book, if he wasn't an important person, he'd be like, "Who's this person?" Because even in the first book, he's always like the naysayer to Kaladin in many ways. Like he's always been like that, but yet he still kind of does have that
Yeah.
fierce type of loyalty.
Yeah, honestly, if you're not paying attention, like you could easily just miss the character
I did
entirely.
the first
Yeah,
time reading through, I was like, "What?" And then I get to the plot, I'm like, "Oh, okay, now I know who he is." And by the third book, oh, I definitely know who he is now. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. The first time I listened, because I do the audio version, audiobook. Um, the only reason I noticed Moash was because Kaladin would think about him, and be like, okay, yeah, I feel the most comfortable with him because he's the one who's willing to oppose me, willing to like not always like call me sir or whatever. Um, and also he
yeah.
made him a squad leader, so
Yeah, and there's like that, that power thing, especially when it comes to them. Especially like another thing that I've always found similar about them is that kind of like that similar light and how they both have these powers. Yes, Moash gets them a little later, but it's kind of like one of those things where they're both of them are basically being manipulated by a higher power in many ways.
Mhm.
And that's something that I've always noticed as well is that when it comes to them, they might have their internal problems, but their internal problems are both quashed both by like Kelsier with Ruin and then Moash with Odium. We'll see what happens later on, but you kind of have that thing like they don't necessarily have free will, even though they think they do.
Yeah, I
It's kind of
mean,
like
quite honestly, Moash, I don't think at this point he's sort of given his free will away.
yeah.
Like it's for Kelsier, I think if he knew he was being manipulated by Ruin, he would have for sure like tried his best to escape from that manipulation.
Yeah,
Because
but there's
I
also
don't.
that thing I've always found like when it comes to him is that it's so subtle. Even if he did know, he probably would have been like, I don't believe in this like stuff, kind of.
Right. I mean, but at the point of Secret History, when uh, he was in the cognitive realm and just roaming around, um, at that point, when he understood everything, I do feel like he still had the ability to not he didn't want to play at being manipulated by the gods. He wanted to be a god. Even though he gave that ability away to Vin, um, he still he didn't strike me as a character that would have been okay with it. He,
Hmm.
when he learned about all of it, he was like, okay, now we got to understand the world completely, and we got to like make sure this never happens again to Scadrial.
Yeah. But then there's
So
also other things too. Like here's a good example of this is how like in Rhythm of War we see Kelsier and how much from an external source, like we always think of him as the hero, but then you see him locking up kids and you see him doing all these horrible things because it's gone from less of him being the gentleman thief and more of like I need to get all this power to prevent a lot of things. It's kind of like the same with Moash. It's like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few sometimes. It's like if I kill Elakar, a lot more people are going to benefit than not killing him. in many ways. Same as with Kelsier. Like there are subtle differences, but a lot of the time when it comes to their motivations, yeah, they're a little different in many ways, but they all lead to kind of the same place of like, I want to prevent this bad thing that happened to me to a whole generation of people, and I'll do it
Hmm.
any means necessary.
Yeah, but hmm. I I do believe Moash somewhat like believes in that. Like he by removing Alucard, things would just overall. I mean, in the second book, for sure, he believes it, but after he kills him, I just feel like he doesn't know what to do at that point. Oh, okay,
Oh, I think that's just the camera stuff. Sorry about that, everyone.
yeah. But at that point, he's just like full on being manipulated by by the gods, by Odium essentially. So and he's like almost willingly letting that happen too. So it's like it's just a very significant difference between the two. Like Kelsier has grand plans while Moash is sort of like wallowing in sorrow about like betraying his
Mhm.
friends, basically pitting himself.
See, and there's that moment in Oathbringer where like he's throwing the stuff into the fire and he has his Bridge 4 tattoo. He's like, well, I can't get rid of this. I'd have to throw myself on the fire. There is like that pity party. But also like there's the moment where actually if I'm going to go to a different source, if I'm going to go through what's it, the short story, The 11th Metal, where Kelsier is going through his pity party, figuring out how to be a Mistborn, there are some similarities between them in that regard of kind of like the great power comes great responsibility, but also at the exact same time, the point that they aren't the same character is that when it comes down to it, Kelsier is willing to sacrifice himself, whereas Moash, I don't see him doing that. I feel like he's just, yeah, okay, I'll just he loses. I think it's more of like it's not one of those things where like if we look at Moash, good example. This is every time he loses a fight now, he's losing more and more of his humanity in many ways. Now that he lost his sight, like what else is he gonna lose until he
Yeah,
gets to whatever he's going for?
yeah. That's definitely. I mean, you definitely highlighted a lot of their similarities, and but like I said, a lot of those core differences just make them very different characters to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely recognize that there's a lot of similarities as well. It's not a black and white thing, obviously.
No. And
Yeah.
that's the thing is that there isn't really like are they the same character? I think they fit very similar type of archetypes in many ways, and that's something that Brandon Sanderson likes to explore. But they're in completely different settings. Where even if Kelsier went to Roshar, he probably wouldn't have been the exact same Kelsier as he is in Mistborn. I think there's again, it's also the tone of the story a little bit.
Hmm.
Whereas if we look at just Kelsier was this gentleman thief who had it all out for himself until the one bad move happened and he's forced to kind of like grow the heck up, but he doesn't really because of external forces. Whereas Moash has always been beaten down by the system because if you look at even the systems, you have the noblemen and the ska with Scadrial, and when it comes to Roshar, you have the light eyes and the dark eyes. Very similar in many ways, but the societies just screw them over to the point of where no matter what, they would have been fundamentally different people, but it also has to do with the tone of those characters a little bit.
Yeah. The setting definitely affects what the characters do, right?
Yeah.
Um, just overall, the Final Empire and um, Alucard.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing, isn't it? Like when it comes down to it, I mean, the Final Empire. Oh, actually, that's a good question. Like, which one's worse? The Final Empire is pretty bad, but Roshar is also pretty bad when it comes to the storms, and that's kind of like one of those things where if we, I don't want to get
Yeah,
into like
but
the environment, nature versus nurture type of stuff, but yeah,
but the storms are like, part of like you said, just it's part of nature, and people have prepared for it. They sort of like built their houses a
they
certain way.
persevere. Whereas when it comes to the Final Empire, the Lord Ruler is their god, and it rains from the sky because straight up he made it so. Because everyone's, it's kind of like one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah. The Lord Ruler allowed Ska children to get killed just for like doing anything out of hand. the rules that he set for the ska were just like terrible, you know. At least in Althkar, like yeah, they're having a war at the moment, but at least the people who are like dark eyes or lower class, they don't instantly die. I mean, sending
Yeah.
them to bridge crew is almost a sentence, but like as
I
we've
mean,
seen.
it's no different than the pits of Hathsin in many ways. I think the pits are worse because Bridge Crew, you have a chance, I guess, of earning your freedom, kind of,
Yeah, I
not
mean,
really.
we see that chance because they survived. So,
Yeah. Well,
but
we also saw Kelsier survive too, but that's after, truly being a broken person.
yeah, so definitely a lot of differences, and I personally think Final Empire would be a little bit worse just because, like, if you were born a ska or whatever, you're done. Like, if you're born a Dark Eyes, you can at least like have a decent life, you know?
When in theory, you can find a shard blade and go up in different social structure. You can't change being a ska.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing that also reflects a good chance of this as well, as when it comes to them is, you have that social ladder on Roshar, whereas when it comes to Kelsier, like, I'm a thief because he even pretty much says in the first book, I was the richest person in the world. I had all this money, but because my ambitions got too great, we did that score on the Lord Ruler and it messed everything up. Whereas when it comes to Moash, they were just in like a weird situation with Amaram, where his parents were just like, well, grandparents are gonna die, and he was powerless
Hmm.
in that extent, and it's kind of like that power vacuum that just happened, where it was out of his control, and now that he has all this power, what does he do with it? Because now that he's the creme of the crop, he doesn't know what to do with it. Whereas Kelsier, most of the time, just Mistborn was just a plus compared to, because he was just kind of doing the exact same thing he was doing.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to read some or do you want me to read some of the like Reddit posts
Oh
that
yeah, yeah, totally.
okay. So this is mainly centered around, the character analysis between Moash and Kelsier, what are their differences, and also like similarities. Um, so I'm gonna read these out and we're gonna talk about them. So we may
Mhm.
disagree or we may agree, but let's see. Okay. Girin says Kelsier cares about and is loyal to his crew and friends. Moash
Mhm.
doesn't have a crew or friends, cares about nothing, and is loyal to no one. That's pretty harsh. I actually don't really think that's true because Moash does care about Bridge 4. He does care about Kaladin, even though, he somewhat betrayed him and went behind his back in trying
Yeah.
to kill Alucard.
Well, he also has kind of a different sense of loyalty too, because especially when it comes to when he has to, he becomes, oh my god, what is that, the like the Parshendi, or the singers, like he has to basically do the bridge crew again. Like, there's like, he has different types of loyalty
Yeah.
he latches on to, so it's not like he's like a lone wolf all the time. But yeah.
All right. King's daughter says, well, it's quite long. So let me try to read one at a time and then we'll talk about it. They're similar in that they dislike the system they're a part of,
Hmm.
but they're not much alike. Moash is content in being in service as long as he perceives his master to be worthy. Kelsier wants to be in charge and has no desire to answer to anyone. What do you think about that statement?
I think that's actually like a very valid statement, especially when it comes to Kelsier, who is kind of like a bull in a china shop. Like, you, someone tells him to not sit in this chair, he'll find a way to steal the chair and then sit in it. Compared to Moash, will just be like, yeah, rules are rules at times, but then he'll also kill that person too if it favors him.
Yeah. Let's see. Kelsier embraces and acknowledges his guilt and uses it to fuel him. Moash literally flees from it.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's kind of like one of those things. Like, he takes like Ambien by odium a little bit. He like kind of forgets, like he just like lets his pain go away, and that's kind of like I don't know, like, what it's kind of like alleviating the problem. Like, he doesn't want to admit that sometimes things are out of people's control, Whereas when it comes to Kelsier, he beats himself up to the point of nauseum until Vin explains to him why, Kelsier's wife didn't actually betray him, but was actually just, some part of the magic system. And
Hmm.
he kind of lets go that way. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
I feel like Kelsier learns from a lot of his mistakes, and like at the end, especially when he got to talk to Vin, and that whole conversation between them was a telling moment for Kelsier. I feel just like his character. Let's
Yeah, no,
see.
most definitely.
Kelsier would never betray a friend, and certainly never kill one to drive another to suicide. Moash does. Yeah, that's very interesting. That's a motivation in Moash that I'm not entirely sure I fully understand. Like, I don't know why he wants Kaladin to kill himself so badly. Um,
See, that's a hard one because when I look at this, I'm always thinking about the scene where Kelsier was all about killing Ellen until there's like that intervention, but also there's even those moments where you know he's like if they're noblemen or screw them. There's a whole part where actually the first time we're introduced to Marsh sends Kelsier, oh, this is a list of all the men that you killed. And Kelsier is like, oh, that's great. Some of them were Ska. Well, that's even better. They're worse than scum at this point. There's kind of like that those moments where even they're very similar, except there's that intervention where Kelsier does have his humanity, whereas Moash kind of loses it. He died a long time ago.
mhm. Yeah, definitely, because Kelsier like eventually admits that keeping Ellen alive was actually like a good thing, but that was in secret history.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that's something to bring up too. Is kind of like that thing of like Kelsier is more willing to admit when he's wrong
Oh, your
than
camera, by
Moash
the
is.
way.
Oh, what did my camera do? Oh, hmm. Hmm. Well, it looks like I'm just going to be doing this for a little bit. This jury rigging on the spot is what happens. Or
Yeah,
does it switch up? Nope. I'm just going
no,
to.
it's not working.
Yeah. Okay. So we're just going to do this. I still got light, so that's good.
Yeah,
Where was I?
it looks fine. We were talking about let's see, the betray a friend thing, and
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like it's kind of like one of those things as well. It's like when it comes to it. Oh man, I was like saying something about from a different No, whatever. Let's. Do you want to say something about this?
yeah, I do feel like Calcier, like his one of the core lessons to Vin was like, okay, trust, right? You got to be
Mm-hmm.
able to trust your friends, like we are your friends. Um, and a crew has to always be able to trust each other. And I do feel that when Moash went behind Kaladin's back, that was something Kelsier would never do. So it does highlight a core difference, I feel.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, there is that core difference. Oh, I remember what I was gonna say is that Kelsey is a person that he actually kind of he learns from his mistakes compared to Moash, where Moash will never admit that he is wrong, whatever.
Whatsoever.
Yeah,
All right, let's see. Kelsier doesn't care if someone else thinks he's right. He knows he is. Moash needs validation. I think that's a funny statement. As for the validity of that statement, let's see. I I don't know. I feel like I don't have any strong feelings about that statement. Like, are there examples of Moash needing validation?
I'm trying to think like really quickly. I think some of the validation is more along the lines of in book three he needs some validation, but that's after he's already kind of left everyone from Bridge Four and he doesn't know really his place in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Other than that, I don't think so because the second that he loses his free will, I guess it's more of the validation from Odium, but that, even then, it's like very minor.
Yeah. Um I'm pretty neutral about that statement. I don't feel like it's. I'd have to like really think about it or like look into it. But yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
funny though. It just shows that Kelsier is very confident, or
Well,
this person thinks that Kelsier is very confident.
I think he's
Um,
a confident mother trucker. There's a lot of things that,
yeah,
I
he
mean,
definitely is.
there's moments where like he'll jump into a battle head first and somehow come out on top. But that's one of those things is Kelsier's confidence, but that's also he was confident going into, yeah, so my plan is already, I just want to become a martyr. He already, you need more confidence, like to go in knowing that my whole plan is for me dying. Yeah, that's some big old confidence right there.
Yeah, but obviously in Secret History, like we see that Kelsier wasn't exactly it was his backup plan. It was his backup plan. Like his first plan was hoping that the 11th metal would do something, but it didn't and he ended up dying. And it's not like he knew 100% that his plan was going to work. He was just he was banking on it, but he still like wasn't sure. And also he was furious when he found out that Ellen was ended up being like king.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's see. Kelsier is more ruthless than Moash. Moash is only ruthless because he's given up his ability to feel. Um, I mean,
Uh
Kelsier is definitely ruthless.
yeah.
But Moash being ruthless only because he's given up his ability to feel. I in some ways, I almost feel like Moash is still not that ruthless. Like he sort of just goes for whoever is in his mind. Like first he kills Elhokar. He always wanted to do that. And then after that, is does he display any signs of like ruthlessness?
So I think it kind of determines how did you define ruthlessness a little bit here, because if we look on the trope of Kelsier as kind of like the this gentleman thief street kid who kind of he's forced to be ruthless for this way, whereas when you kind of could look at ruthlessness, if we look at the bridge crews, sometimes you have to be ruthless to survive in that way. It may be being able to pick the order of where you are on that bridge run, but if we're going by like fighting, Kelsier is more ruthless because he's willing to use a lot more of his environment. I guess that's also because if you're a mistborn, you have to think about the metals and all that stuff. Whereas when it comes to Moash, yeah, I think you're right about like he's very fixed on certain people because he looks at the people that have screwed him out the most, and that's kind of the people he goes for. But I wouldn't call him ruthless. I'd call Moash maybe more relentless than anything because he'll keep pursuing that person. He actually, but then there's like that ruthlessness of like, hey, Odium, why don't you give, you know, Kaladin all these horrible dreams so he just offs himself. Like that's ruthless because he knows he plays against the person's strength rather than you know Kaladin's weakness. Whereas Kelsier might have been maybe that's a little too extreme a little bit here. It's a possibility.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, Kelsier is a revolutionary who wanted to bring the system down. Moash just wanted to put a better Light Eyes in charge
Um, he didn't become a so. In my opinion, when it comes to this, is that Kelsier didn't become a revolutionary until his
until
wife
after
died.
the pit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
after the pit. That's and the only reason why he did that was kind of to get revenge on the Lord Ruler, and a lot of it was driven by him and Ruin. In many ways, of like Ruin's like, okay, if you do this, I'll show you and help you because this is what's going to happen. But he didn't become revolutionary. That was Marsh's thing. That's why there's a whole scene in the Final Empire where Marsh actually again I think it's the first time they introduced where Marsh is like, how dare you don't steal this rebellion from me all because you're using it for your own little plan because he sees the
Yeah,
ATM
yeah.
thing on the whiteboard and stuff. So he was never really a revolutionary until Revenge is a dish best served cold.
Yeah. I mean that was a huge aspect to Marsh's like character arc, right? The fact
Mhm.
that Kelsier took on the head of the rebellion when it was supposed to be him. Okay,
Yeah.
let's see. Kelsier thinks on a grand scale, Moash thinks in a smaller one. I think that's generally correct.
Yeah.
There's no disputing. At least I don't see can't think of anything on the top of my head to dispute that.
So when I think of like the grand scale thing, I think yeah, they both think on a small scale, but what Kelsier does, especially in the beginning with like the Final Empire, is this plan is so big we have to break it up into small chunks. Like he has to, you have to think of it small scale to your, you have to think of it small scale to your obstacles before you can get to the grand scheme.
Hmm.
But I always thought that Kelser always thinks about the end game more than Moash. I don't think Moash has any plans. Like he doesn't have like a Stormlight 401k. He's just gonna keep doing what he's doing until he can't do it anymore.
Yeah. I mean that highlights a stark difference between the two. I do feel like Kelsier overall is just more intelligent than Moash. Let's see.
Yes. Before
Kelsier,
we continue, I actually have a message from a chill mango. Hello, I've been lurking on the stream. It looks really good. Well, thank you so much.
yeah, what's up, Mango? All right, let's see. Kelsier works with teams and crews. Moash is a loner. It's generally true.
Yeah.
Kelsier, for all his grandiosity, is subtle and cunning and works through guile. Moash is direct. Yeah.
So I think originally Moash was more willing to work in a team until Kaladin kind of messed that up for him in many ways, and then afterwards he's kind of like, if I want something done, I'll do it myself. And Kelsier's always been the crew mentality because being in a thieving crew, you kind of have to have that thought process because we see it with like good example of this is, oh my god, what's his name? The original crew leader for Vin, like his worst punishment is he becomes a beggar. God,
Yeah.
like kind of like that thing. Like if you're not with a crew, you're like worse than dirt. Yeah. So there's
Yeah.
kind of like those things.
Okay, Kelsier is willing to do whatever it takes to see his plans through and accept the price for it. Moash is not capable of doing that. I mean, Moash did kill Alucard, so I do feel like that was Moash's main goal. So yeah,
Yeah.
but I suppose he didn't like do it alone. He did have a lot of help, but yeah.
Yeah, and also it's like he was at the right place at the right time. He was just lucky that Alucard's like, you know what, I'm gonna lead this charge. Otherwise, he just would have been like, any day now, I'm just gonna go back up to Urithiru and mess him up.
All right, Kelsier is an optimist. Moash is a pessimist.
Yes, but I think that has to do with a lot with the environment that they're in. I think you're kind of. I'm sure Moash at one part of his life was not a miserable person,
Hmm.
but circumstance kind of changed that. Whereas Kelsey kind of was always an optimist, but got emboldened and stubborn after the pits.
Agreed. Okay. Kelsier chooses love and trust despite the pain. Moash gives it up. Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
I can't dispute that.
Kelsier is passionate and Moash is apathetic. At this point, that is very true. Um,
Yeah.
this is an interesting point. Kelsier is a neurological psychopath and Moash is not.
So I think that has to define again how the pits break you a little bit because if anything, if we know, I guess again, ruin only works through was hemalurgic spikes,
Mhm.
blah blah, spikes, and also if your person's insane. So being in that kind of torture, like you know what, I'm sure Moash has a little bit of crazy in him too, especially when it comes to Sadius in the game. Like if Ruin was on Roshar and you just saw these bridge crew people, like, oh man, here we go. I have all these servants. I don't even need to spike them. And
Let's see.
even still, like he lets his emotions go, and that's just a different type of thing. Like he's letting it. I guess that's kind of like you're letting go of your empathy and what makes you human, just to not say no, but rather carry the deed out. So yeah, they're kind of both the same, but it depends on where you are.
Kelsier enjoys killing people. Moash doesn't.
Um, what do you think about this?
I'm trying to think if there's like a exact like statement that says that Kelsier was enjoying like killing them. Like I know for sure he wanted to, and that was like like one of his goals to wipe out pretty much all the noblemen. But did he enjoy doing it? I I'm trying to remember if there's like a
See, that's more of like a Zane thing, isn't it? Like he enjoyed killing people, but Kelsier, I think it was kind of like a means to an end a little bit because
yeah.
I mean, there's like the whole big first fight scene again. If I go back to that scene with like Marsh and all of them, Kelsier doesn't care. Like he's like, there's less number of them than it is for me,
Hmm.
and it's like, okay, good. That's kind of like that type of thought process. But when it comes to Moash, I don't think he doesn't enjoy killing people, but after like he lets that pain go away, it doesn't really matter. Good, bad. I'm the one with the shard blade.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not. I can't really say that that statement is true because I do feel like at least at the end, Kelsier changed his mind about noblemen. So I can't say that he does enjoy killing people, but maybe I could be wrong. I could be missing something.
I'm trying to think about like when it comes down to again, that goes back to Kelsier's the person that's willing to own up on his mistakes, whereas
Hmm.
Moash doesn't, and you kind of have like that enjoying a killing. I don't think either of them enjoy killing all that much. It's just something that's like breathing to them. They have to do it, or they'll be the ones getting killed.
Hmm. Okay. Um, that those are generally the shorter statements. There's a couple longer ones. Do you want to go through them, or do you want to like move to a different
I
thing?
think let us open up if there's anyone in the chat that has any questions or maybe things that we can brush up on when it comes to this. Like, what do you all think of this? I'd love to hear your thoughts about this because when it comes down to it, I mean, I wouldn't say that they're both the same type of character, but they fit a lot of like those. Like if we look at their plot structure a little bit, they're very similar in many ways on paper, but in reality, they're not. But I'd love to hear people's thoughts about this. Are they the same character fundamentally, or is there something we're missing or something we're forgetting when it
Yeah.
comes to?
Also thank you for to King's Daughter 613 on Reddit for
Oh yeah,
that post. It definitely gave us a lot to talk about.
yeah. It's like it's one of those things. Like, in your opinion, like I know you're not the person that's like the F Moash or Moash did nothing wrong, but it's like it, hypothetically, oh, I guess that's not hypothetically. There could be a scene where Kelsier and Moash meet up. How do you think that that would go down?
Interesting. I mean, like the Kelsier that is at this point, right, is probably going to be pretty different in some ways from like the Kelsier we knew in Mistborn. So I can't. I mean, if they're like very similar still, I feel like Kelsier would be like, okay, can I use this person to my benefit in some way?
Mm-hmm.
And if I can, like how? And he'll try to do that. Otherwise, if he's in his way, he's just gonna find some way to kill
Yeah.
him.
Well, I feel like Kelsier, if this is Final Empire, met Moash, Rhythm of War, he would have been like, "Oh God, I hate this guy so much. This guy is there's something off about him. I just don't like him, and I just don't want him in my thieving crew. He's bad." But Moash would have been like, "God, this guy's kind of an a hole a little bit." But they like walk into a bar together. Nothing good's gonna end up with that.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like even if we're taking book 1, 2, or 3 Moash, I don't think Kelsier would find him, like, suitable to be in his crew just because he doesn't seem like a team player
He'd
overall.
ask he'd ask Breeze, "Hey, can you like soothe this guy?" And he's like, "I've flared all I got. Like, sorry."
It's not really responsive.
No, it's like I've burned all my metal. There's nothing I can do, Cal. I'm sorry. Yeah, but there's that thing, and it's always fun to like talk about that stuff because, again, I think that's the thing that's a good testament to Brandon Sanderson is we can have these conversations because these characters aren't black and white in many ways. They have a
Mhm.
lot of depth to them, which I really like, especially when it comes to Moash. That guy has a lot of depth to him. Same as with Kelsier. Kelsier, when you first start reading the book, like, oh, this guy is like the hero. This guy's awesome. But by the end, also when you read Secret History, you find a different, like, I guess, respect and appreciation for him. in many ways, which I think
Oh,
that's just
definitely.
like a testament to Brandon Sanderson and how he writes his stories, especially having like again, if we're going to Rhythm of War, that kind of like that culture shock of realizing that's Kelsier, and you're not like, oh, he's not the main character of the story anymore, so you don't know how he's going to react to a person that you have a connection with, but to him he has zero connection with. Has always been interesting to me.
Hmm.
Oof. I guess we don't have anything in the chat, so we could always have some final statements. Is there anything you want to bring up? Anything you'd like to plug, Scott?
Just to conclude my thoughts on the matter, I do think there's a lot of like similarities. Like the similarities are like they have experienced Calcier has experienced the pits of Hatson, and then Moash has experienced the bridge cruise, and then they both came out of it sort of as changed people, and they both want to take revenge on someone who is like who has a is up there basically like the Lord Ruler and then King. So in those ways they are similar, but in a lot of the like characteristics and just their personality traits, I do think there's a lot of differences that,
Mm,
like for instance, Cassier has a lot more charisma. He's a team player. Moash is not, um, and he's more of a lone wolf. So those are just some very brief differences that I feel like stick out to me. Um, as for plugs, I do have it on my name, but it's pretty small probably. So you can find my Twitter. It's the handle is at Scotty Lou. So it's LUU. Um, and
yes.
for my channel, it's called Blue Lotus Podcast. So if you just type in YouTube Blue Lotus Podcast, you'll find it.
Sweet. Yes. There's going to be links
Oh,
for
I
this after
can hear
once
you,
this is
but
done. Oh, hello.
give me a second.
Oh, oh,
Um,
did oh, this is the beauty of
I'm pretty sure
live
the stream will
streaming.
still hear you.
Yeah, no, I'm sure yeah. But what I'm gonna say, I'll pantomime to you is that there's gonna be links to all that stuff down once this thing's done, because we'll have this up on the YouTube channel, so that'll be great. My closing thoughts when it comes down to this is that I think on paper, if you look at them very much like how we're discussing them, they're very much different people. But if you look at them, you put the pros and the cons without really discussing it, they do sound very similar in many ways. I'm actually very much with you, Scott, when it comes down to this. It's
Hmm.
one of those things where they're different, but also here's the thing: Ruin would have loved Moash, and Kelsier would have loved Odium in many ways. Like you can always have that flip flop, but in the end of the day, I think there's such different characters that you can still have the same type of character beats to them, but due to the story and the tone, they'll always be different, and they're not always going to be one for one in many ways. And that's something I love discussing about this, and I think that's kind of the fun thing. And when it comes to me and my plugs, if you want to go to Twitter, you go to Suda41. I'll have a link down below. My channel's here. I do weekly videos. I'll talk about Cosmere, King Killer, random fantasy books, just random things, random thoughts, and kind of start doing more of these live streams because they're a lot of fun to do. And it's one of those things that happens. And yeah.
All right,
Well,
for sure.
well, everyone, thank you all so much for watching the stream. If you haven't had a chance, like it, subscribe. We're going to be doing more of these very soon. We'll have a variety of subjects, some more Mistborn, some more Stormlight, some more King Killer. We'll see what's going on here, everyone. And like always, I'm Zach.
Oh, I'm Scott.
Yeah, well, I guess journey before destination, everyone.